Alright, so today we're going to be going through a quick tutorial on how to operate a drift car. So essentially there's a couple, right now this is the TT-02, Tamiya TT-02 drift setup. It has a locked rear differential and it's all-wheel drive. Right, I'm using a Flysky GT-3C right now. Basically how it works is you have throttle, brake, reverse, and then you have steer. As for settings, I have no exponential, and all my endpoints are at maximum. So basically how this goes is you have, it's called brake, gas, counter steer. So you just want to practice driving it around a little bit. And essentially what you're doing is, the concept of drifting is you're breaking the friction between the car and the ground, so you're controlling an out of control car. Kind of ironic, but that's what drifting is all about. So you basically want to do is you want to get the throttle up high enough that your car starts to go into a drift, and then from that you control two things: the throttle and the steering, in order to control that. So first thing is, let's try experimenting with what throttle does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it, control all the way. I'm going to go control the throttle. So you'll notice that it's a very tight turn angle, but if I can control the throttle, and using that I can also control where the car goes. Now let's try controlling the steering. So I'm going to keep the throttle just above the point that the car loses traction, but I'm going to be controlling the steering now. So it's a little bit more difficult there. And essentially what drifting is all about is controlling these two things: throttle and steer, directional control. One thing that I found to be very helpful on this drift car is to pulse the throttle to keep the friction, to keep the car from gaining control. So loosening the friction. So first thing we want to do is we just want to try drifting in a circle. So I'm going to do is I'm going to go full deflection, pulse the throttle, and then control the throttle and steer from there. Now that you can kind of do that, you'll notice that sometimes I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm moving control. And that's where the counter steer comes in. So you have brake, gas, and then counter steer. So counter steering just compensates, because if we didn't have counter steering, it would go like this. But if you counter steer, you can counteract that. That's where the directional control comes in. There you go. So notice how during tight turns, I'm counter steering in the opposite of the direction that I want to go in order to control the direction of the car. So next up, this next exercise is to do a figure eight. This figure eight's a little bit more difficult, especially in a small area like this, but I will do my best to give an adequate demonstration. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to drive out to the street and we'll show you some more. We'll show you some drifting that is hopefully a little bit more controlled in a larger environment. So now we're just going to do a couple of passes, and now we'll be able to see actually where the drift car actually is able to take full advantage of its capabilities. So what you'll notice is now when I'm turning, I counter steer in order to compensate for the angular momentum of the car. And it's always trying to manage that fine point between losing control but then gaining traction again. And that is a combination, it's a function of your RPM speed and the angle that you're steering at. One thing that you'll notice, sorry, let's wait for this truck to go by. One thing that you'll notice is that when you lose traction, you're able to drift at slower speeds when you have a larger angle. And the same thing, you're able to drift at higher speeds with control when you have a smaller angle. So you notice here, I'm not moving the angle very much. I'm not steering the car a lot, but I'm using high throttle. And what that high throttle does is it breaks the friction. Now, that was that. Let's try with low speed, but more turning. So with that one, I'm using about 50% throttle there. 25 to 50%, and through that whole time I was going maximum steering in order to create this slip. So I'll just do a couple more passes, and also hopefully I'll have this in the background here. So notice how I'm pulsing the throttle as I'm drifting. Now if we focus back on the car, I'll do the exact same thing now, and this is what it's able to achieve. So that's really all there is. That's really all there is to RC drifting. It's pretty simple, pretty fun. The number one thing is to go see it for yourself. Experiment, test out new things. Try play with the throttle and the steering, brake, gas, counter steer, in order to control a car that is out of control. And that's why drifting is so fun. It's not about just going as fast as you can. It's not about trying to be as flashy as possible, but it's really an art. It's how do you control an out of control car? How do you control a car elegantly in a way that's aesthetically pleasing to the eye? And it's also very, very entertaining, and it's a fine skill to learn, especially if you would like to up your game in the RC ground vehicle world. So that, I hope this video was helpful to anyone out there that wants to get into RC drifting. Again, this is the Tamiya TT-02 with a Honda Acura NSX shell.